Hello and welcome to the podcast, Celebrating Differences. This is episode 102, and today we're talking with Charlie Gandy. One of the things that I loved about Charlie was he was one of the youngest legislators ever elected in Texas. He was 23 years old when he was elected to be a state representative. He only served one term, but he got a lot of experience and went on to serve with other politicians. Then he formed the Texas Bicycle Coalition, which became Bike Texas, and has changed the way we bicycle in Texas. And then he went on and took that experience and took it nationwide. So Charlie's had a really big impact on bicycling in America. Now he's working on a special deal in cooperation with Bike Texas to create a trail across Texas that's for walking, biking, and horse riding. And it's an adventure trail. It's 1,500 miles. It has 56,000 feet of elevation. So this is not for the afternoon walker. Charlie is putting it together and is looking for money. So we'll talk about raising some money for Charlie at the end. So stay with us and let's go see what Charlie has to say about his life and the xTexas Trail in Texas.
This is the greatest thing. Charlie Gandy, we go way back, but he goes really way back. And he's been doing stuff in Austin and in Texas for a lot of years. And we're going to be talking about that. And we're going to talk about his new project. So, Charlie?
Great to see you, Preston.
Yeah, so where are you living now, Charlie?
You know, it's great when fossils are able to come back together and come to life.
Yeah.
This is all animated, right? We're animated fossils.
There you go.
I love it. Right now, I live, I'll speak in the present. I live in a van down by the railroad.
with flamingos.
With flamingos.
Yeah.
That's, I'm not trying to be too classy, but I do have flamingos.
You do, okay.
I live outside Seattle on the Hood Canal and lived there for the last 5 years. My wife Melissa and I live with her aunt who needs some help, and so I am the chief gardener and landscaper at the Lazy Acre Nursing Home outside Poulsbo, Washington.
So you've gotten a promotion.
They are holding me accountable. That's a new thing.
That's different. Woo! Wish we could have.
I know, it's scary. But I'm 66 now. I've started to learn some things, and I squandered that first 6 decades. But I'm ready. I'm coming back, baby. I am reborn. Thinking about Jimmy Carter, I am reborn. He's 100 years old. That gives me another 34 years.
You got a whole nother career.
Well, you know what? In all seriousness about this xTexas project, it has certainly. It has certainly inspired me to get back in the saddle and ride again. I enjoy retirement. I have enjoyed hiking and bicycling everywhere and living a car light and car free lifestyle for the last decade out on the West Coast. I have had more adventures, and I have made more friends with 30-year-olds because most of the old codgers like me aren't out there. You know that. And so I have this whole set of friends that are age 30 to 40 years old that I hike with, I bike with, I climb mountains with, and they teach me stuff about things like brat.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty current now.
Oh, good. Okay.
I'm pretty current.
Good.
And so I have a new lease on life in the sense that I have this big hairy goal, and when I started testing it with people, their eyes started lighting up because they'd either thought about it or they could see the potential for taking a route across the longest part of Texas, through the middle of the state, through what I refer to as the heart of true Texas, in 3 basic regions, from the Gulf Coast lowlands to the hill country to the desert. And having seen that kind of trail come to existence and be popular in places like the Pacific Coast Trail, the Continental Divide Trail, and then of course the grandfather of them all, the Appalachian Trail.
Right.
A light bulb went off for me last spring while I was hiking out in California, because I've hiked almost all of not all of them, the whole routes, but I've hiked all of the major routes in the West.
Okay.
And I've hiked all the 14ers in Colorado, and so I come at this as a active participant.
A 14er is a mountain that's 14,000 feet.
Or above.
Or above, okay.
And there's 50, when I did them, there were 54 of them. There's 58 now. I'm not sure where they found those.
Where'd they find the other 4? Yeah.
Something about
they grew up.
Technology.
Yeah, they grew up. Yeah, okay.
Anyway, yes. So that has been my entry into seeing the possibility of a long distance trail that would take people through the heart of Texas. And the best way I have learned to describe my emotion about this is that it's either 4 or 5 R's now. The xTex, the Cross Texas route, adventure route, is remote,
Okay.
rustic,
Yeah.
rugged, and therefore romantic.
Okay.
And it's that romance that people, about long distance trails, people get on that trail, and whether they walk a mile or 1,500 miles, they can imagine and they can feel the energy of that route and can imagine themselves being drawn to. Mostly this route, I imagine it from east to west. And that's because I'm a cyclist and I like tailwinds, and I don't like headwinds. And so most the prevailing tailwinds or winds are out of the southeast. And so, and by the way, this route is a 3-season route.
Okay.
It's not designed for summertime use. Just like the Colorado Trail is not good in the wintertime for most of us. Same reverse here. And by the way, while we're talking about other trails, is it okay if I just ramble on like this?
Yeah, and I'm going to draw you back in, and we're going to talk about some of your history in Texas and all that stuff.
But I'm on a roll right now.
Let's talk. The other trails.
The opportunity I saw then as a marketer on the xTex is, with the exception of Florida, there are no long distance trails in the South or in the winter season.
Okay.
And so all of those other trails are done in the spring, summer, or fall, none in the winter. And the problem is with fires out west and hurricanes out east, it significantly reduced the number of people who could actually finish those trails because of the fires out. It took out whole sections of the Pacific Crest Trail this year, and it has over the last decade. So you have to skirt around them and such. And it took me off of a trail. Smoke took me off of the Pacific Northwest Trail a couple of years ago for the same reasons. It was hot and smoky. Who needs that? But there, and then of course the Appalachian Trail right now, a third of it is unhikeable because of that storm. And
I've got friends who live in Asheville.
My sister lives in Boone.
Yeah.
They're cut off. They're prepared, but some of their neighbors aren't. Anyway, yeah. And Asheville, good God, I've seen images of that. So anyway, the point here is that this is a winter Texan route.
Okay.
And that's what I'm doing now, is being a winter Texan. And it gives me an excuse to get out of the rain in Seattle. Was that answer too long?
No. No. Because this is it's obviously your new passion.
Right.
It's obviously you've gotten this vision, and that's how things get done.
It's not to be taken for granted.
Let's go back and talk about some of your early visions now. Okay, we got that. We'll come back to xTex. We first met right after you were elected to the state legislature, I believe. And if I remember correctly, you were one of the youngest ever elected to the Texas state legislature. Why in the world did you do that? How old were you when you got elected?
When I got elected, I was 23.
Yeah.
And I had worked for a House member who ran for the state Senate, because that seat opened up from Mesquite, and it was a good year for Democrats. He won and I won. And no one was more surprised that I was. I was a political science major at UT. I had worked at the Capitol. I had experience around that world. And in fact, the guy I ran against, the former mayor of Mesquite, I had more legislative experience than he had. And it was a good year for Democrats. So I won. I served one term. I got to reach puberty on the House floor, and I got to pass the child safety seat bill. That's probably the one that's my pride piece of legislation during that time. It had failed in 3 previous sessions, and Stan Schleter, another House member, senior guy, had his plate full. He said, "Yeah, you take this. I don't have time for it." And so we put together a campaign with the car dealers and the doctors, and got past the conservative opposition to that bill in 1983 in a special session when Mark White was the governor, and joined. We were the 49th state in the nation to pass that law, just ahead of Wyoming. And anyway, and I was popular for throwing parties. I had a good time.
Yes, okay.
And but then, I was a Democrat in Dallas in 1985 when no Democrats won because Reagan swept the country and Mondale didn't have any coattails in the state. In fact, took us down. And so at age 25, I became the state's youngest elder statesman and went to work for Mark White, the governor, in the Office of State Federal Relations. So I was spending time in Washington, basically being a lobbyist for the state of Texas, working on a team of talented people that were making sure we got for every dollar we sent to Washington, we got $1 back. That was our goal.
Okay, which
anyway,
doesn't always work.
No, we're a donor state.
Yeah. So, next step back, where were you born? Where were you raised?
Thank you. This is fun. We get to talk about my favorite subject.
Yeah, there you go. That's what you're here for. Yeah.
As a buddy of mine said a long time ago, in all sincerity, I was born in a log condominium.
Yeah, okay.
Right after dirt was invented.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was born in Dallas, raised first 10 years there. My dad got a job with Frontier Airlines in Denver. We moved to Denver in '68. I got rheumatic fever in 1970 when I was about 12, and I got a heart murmur that was supposed to slow me down, and I was supposed to take penicillin, and I overheard the doctor saying, he's got a weak heart. He won't live forever, or at least I saw that. And that medical event gave me a perspective on life that said, don't wait around, that this is a fleeting thing. And I didn't expect to live beyond 30, and so I was focused on putting points on the board as a young person because I knew it wasn't going to last forever.
Okay.
And so I happened to think that sense of urgency served me well in taking risks and challenging myself and not sitting around. ADHD helps too, just to have some energy and short attention span.
I'm with you on that one.
Right, but that comes in handy in some ways too. Yeah. So, so I got sick. I got well. I went to school there, and then my parents divorced. We moved to Mesquite, Texas, where my aunt lived, and in '74.
Did you go with your mom or your dad?
With my mom.
Okay.
Got a job working at the skating rink, Broadway Skateland. Became proficient on 4 wheels before it was hip to do. I was a racer. I had a partner, and we danced. I had fluorescent colored one-piece leotards. Fortunately, that was before cameras were invented.
Before cameras, yeah. I was asking, you got one of those? You got a picture of that?
But then we had a macho side on Saturday nights after the session. We'd clean up, and by midnight we had the teams lined up to play roller hockey, and we played till 3 a.m. and then went to the Circle Grill and had chicken fried steak. Okay. Those were my Saturday nights as a teenager.
All right.
And but I was also in ROTC. It's important if we're going to talk about what influenced me,
Yeah.
that I found a tribe within the quasi-military establishment of ROTC, both in Denver and in Mesquite. And so I was a cadet, and in fact I excelled at that. And it taught me a whole bunch about leadership and about getting along with people and coaching them to succeed and so forth. And so I became the colonel of the battalion, the highest rank in the history of my school district, the Mesquite Stallions. You know what I was a North Mesquite Stallion. Do you know what the Mesquite, the original school, you know what their, what do you call that? Not logo, their
mascot.
Their mascot.
Roadrunner.
Mosquito.
A mosquito. Mesquite's mosquitoes.
The Mesquite Skeeters.
Cool. Yeah, Skeeters. Okay.
You know what they're, so you know what they do from the from the stands?
Yeah.
You know, I'm glad I'm able to bring this to you, Preston.
Yeah, but you know, the name of the podcast is Celebrating Differences, and that's what we love to look at. And you pointed to one thing that's very clear in your mind, made a difference in your life, and that was this conversation that you heard. It said, "You may not last long," and you said, "Well, shit, I better do some stuff."
Why postpone joy?
Yeah.
And why wait around? This is fleeting. And I noticed that most people didn't have that perspective, you know, as my peers. But then, you know, I was lucky too. I was by putting myself out there and getting into the game in Austin, I got into a world where when I was a senior in college, in '79 I got a job at the Capitol working for Ted Lyon, the state house member at the time from Mesquite, and that got me into the door. And the next year in the off season was 1980. I was working on the Carter Mondale re-election campaign, and so I was the youngest staff person on the campaign. I was the Radar O'Reilly of
you go.
Which nobody under 50 years old knows who Radar O'Reilly is, and that's okay. Well, that's another class.
Yeah.
But the coolest part about that job, besides speaking on behalf of people who've just reached puberty, is that I got to drive in the presidential motorcades when Carter or Mondale would show up at the Austin airport. We'd be sitting out there, you know, the airplane would land, the president would get off, get into his pod, and I was driving the van that had the press corps.
Okay.
And so they were piling into the van because they knew that when the presidents left, everybody left, whether they were in the van or not. And so it was a cool thing for a 20-year-old. They had done a check on me, and they didn't find anything. There was nothing to find. But they let me drive in this motorcade with cops on either side.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, screaming sirens and going to whatever the destination was through the day, and then going back to the airport at night and shaking the president's hand.
Okay.
and saying adios. And so that was pretty heady stuff at 20 years old.
So 23, you were elected, you served one term, got diselected. You ran the second term?
Oh yeah, I tried.
Okay.
Oh, I had all the money. I had all the. I was in the wrong. I was in the right place in '83 and the wrong place in '85.
And then
The tide comes in, the tide goes out.
You were still working in the legislature.
Oh yeah, I worked for the governor.
Where did the vision of Bike Texas come from?
Well,
I'm sorry, the Texas Bicycle Coalition.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. It's some kind of time warp.
Yeah.
Some of us stopped evolving in about, I don't know, 86.
Yeah. I got to Austin in 87.
There you go.
I know what you're talking about.
You know, I got out of the legislature. I had a political science degree. I worked for the governor. And then when Bill Clements became the governor, I tried out lobbying. I was pretty good at it, but I didn't like doing it. It didn't appeal to me because I knew I could sell stuff and promote stuff, but doing that on behalf of the car dealers or the real estate developers or some other special interest just didn't light my bulb.
Okay.
And so I spent a year working for the Nature Conservancy, raising money for them. and that was good too, but it wasn't as political as I could see in hindsight that I needed to be. So I came back to Austin and worked for Jim Hightower's campaign, raising money for him. I can tell some fun stories
I
about
bet.
that.
An interesting guy.
And that segues into my my Willie Nelson stories, which, if you've got a what is it, fans only page, we can start charging people to hear those stories.
Those stories.
But back to Hightower. Yeah. This is the free channel, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Am I looking at this camera enough? I'm
Probably
not really.
But
I'm
once
not.
you get talking about xTX,
There
you
go.
will be.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
We're good then, huh? Me and Bill Bunch were sitting at a cafe over on Barton Springs Road that's no longer there, trying to figure out what we were going to do with our life in about 1989 or 90.
Okay.
And he said, you know, TxDOT's about to go through a round of sunset review, and bicyclists ought to be at the table on that. And I said, yeah, you're right. And I'm surprised that they're not. So I checked it out. I checked around with the League of American Wheelmen,
Great.
and other and local bike organizations, and didn't find anybody who was going to be at the table for that. And so that showed me that I needed to potentially, which I did, play a bridge between the bike world in Texas and the political world in Texas.
Okay.
No one else was doing that, and I had experience in both. As a cyclist that had toured around Europe, and my bike in Mesquite, Texas was my transportation, blah, blah, blah. I could see that, and even then, as a political guy, I could see where, with rare exception, bicyclists are out in the public space, and we need to be, and it's a dangerous place.
Yeah, can be.
Yeah, and so there's some things that we can do, because I'd been to Europe, I had seen the future. I knew that if this was a political act, that if we got our political act together, we could run a agenda. And the inverse is true. If we don't have our act together, we are roadkill.
Literally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was the light bulb that went off for me.
Okay.
I started in 1990 going around. Austin Cycling Association gave me a couple $100 to go to. Or are you the one that did that? Thank you very much. You and what's his name that passed away a year ago? The writer.
Fred Meredith.
Fred Meredith.
Yeah.
He's the one I think of in that.
Well, of course, he was the editor of the newsletter and all that kind of stuff, and all I was president of the association
at the time.
At the time, and
well,
he was the editor, and he's the one everybody knew, and that was just fine.
You know, so 34 years or 35 years later, thank you.
Yeah.
Because that gave me, one, the ability to say that the Austin Cycling Association has taken the lead and put me out here to talk about this. And so I went around and I was the Johnny Appleseed of fear, and showing bicyclists that were in the clubs that they had some exposure, they had some risk here, and by that time they were banning bikes north around Frisco, and so this was a real threat. And what I was doing was showing them the threat, and that brought us together.
So you said fear earlier, threat now, same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know how deep you want to go into that, but
well, I want to make sure that people get where you've been leading up to this.
I'll just hit the highlights then.
Yeah.
So we created the Texas Bicycle Coalition. It became formal in 1991. We had a board of about 17 people that came together in San Antonio as an organizing group, and over a weekend we created a organization. We raised about $1,700. One guy gave $1,000, and everybody else gave a total of another $700, which in the Stone Age that was real money.
Yeah.
And we were launched, and I was volunteering as the organizer of that event and of what got us to there, and then I forgot who we turned it over to, Ann Baird, I think, because we did a search for an executive director because I knew as a political organizer that we needed to create a sustainable organization that was going to outlast this enthusiasm, and that needed to be a professionally run organization. Anyway, I became a candidate for the executive director job. I got it, and I spent the next 4 years, 90 to 94, as the executive director of Texas Bicycle Coalition, and got to prove my point, which was bicycling is political, and we can either be in charge of our agenda or we can be passive and be victims, and that this is a long-term sustainable effort. It needs to be, because as long as we're riding bikes and out there in a vulnerable place, we need to be doing our job every single day to make it safer. And so I couldn't believe that I got to make a living taking the skills that I had learned in the political world and applying them to a group of people that I shared values with as cyclists.
And I bet your people in your family couldn't believe you made a living at bicycling.
They still don't.
They still don't. Yeah, I know. I had that my whole career.
What?
You're doing what?
Yeah. And yeah, I wish I could. Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, a note on that. Gus Garcia, you remember Gus?
Oh yeah.
So in 1992, in the old post office downtown, I went down to get the mail. Gus was in there. I'd been on the job a couple of years, and I knew Gus from politics locally. And I said, Gus, I can't believe it's so hard to paint a bike lane in Austin, Texas. What are we doing wrong? He said, Charlie, you're only doing the hardest thing there is to do, and that is change the status quo.
Okay.
And he said, you know, my people have never been to Europe. We don't know what you know. We don't see what you see. If you want us to appreciate that, you have to show us. It's not something we can imagine. And so what he was saying was stay open to it, recognize we're not going to move as fast as everybody else or some people, and it's foreign to us, so show us and help us understand it. Some of the best advice I ever got.
Good.
And it's still hard to paint a bike lane in Austin.
Still hard to paint a bike lane in Austin. In most places, it's getting better.
Oh, you know what? It's
getting better.
Let's talk old people for a moment. Let's talk about old guys and my perspective now. After I did that, I got to go on a national level and basically take the model of the Texas Bicycle Coalition and provide that as a template for other cities and states to use. Right. Amazing, rewarding work. It was so, in my opinion, powerful in showing people that there's a role for social groups and there's a role for political groups in our world.
Yes.
And we need both. But don't expect the social group to do the political work or vice versa.
Yeah.
If you've got an agenda, talk to me. And if I want your company, I'll go on the bike ride. Yeah. But otherwise, they're different things.
Well, and we're seeing that in Austin now, where Safe Streets Austin has basically taken over the bike world and the walking and all that kind of stuff, but it's a political organization. And so we don't have the 400 rides a year that Austin Cycling was doing as a social group. So we don't have that mix anymore, which is kind of interesting. I want to work forward and give you some serious time on your current project. So all of that stuff went on. You're still doing bicycling all over the United States, and you had this vision of, and most people when you say this, they think you are crazy. I'm going to ride my bike across Texas. Are you crazy? Yeah, you are.
Yeah. Nobody sober or lucid would consider that a viable choice. Why would you do that?
Why would you do that?
But then that person's never said, comfort weakens me.
Okay.
I'm looking for the challenge. I'm looking to test myself. I'm looking to take on something bigger than me and see if I can live up to what I think I'm capable of. And so not all of us are suited to that, but for those of us that are, taking on goals and troubleshooting through to success is where we find joy, happiness, freedom, and sometimes orgasms.
Okay. That's a good place to put in a plug for our nonprofit. We have a nonprofit called WOW, W-A-A-O. It stands for We Are All One.
Okay.
And people look at you funny when you say that, but the idea is you are one. You're special, you're unique. Nobody else is like Charlie Gandy, but you're part of a whole. And the whole wouldn't work as well without you. So that's the vision. That's what we're trying to say. Wow, look at this guy. He's done all these things and he made all these points, and he's very different, but that's special.
You know what?
Okay, and we can learn a hell of a lot from Charlie Gandy.
And in fact, I figured out I'm not very good at fitting in anyway.
So you might as well.
I might as well be myself. And some people don't appreciate it, and others do.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that.
And there are times both ways. Yeah.
And sometimes I disappoint myself.
Okay, but we've got this vision. We're going across Texas on a bike and walking and
on a horse.
And on a horse, okay? Well, this is Texas, yeah.
That's right. And in fact, that's a strategic move.
Yes.
I'll show you on the map
All
why. You ready to do that?
Let's do that.
All right. There are three things that we're doing simultaneously right now, and I learned this from political organizing and when you advocate, organize. So we're identifying our friends along the route. We are telling our friends outside that there's this badass challenge called the xTexas that you need to take on. And third, we're raising a little money. We've raised $20,000 in the last 6 weeks, and we need to raise another 20 grand in the next month or so that we have enough to just cover our basic expenses until springtime, when we roll out a couple of events to celebrate the official opening of the xTexas.
Great. So send money.
Well, you know what?
And it's
our website is
xTexas.org.
And
Okay.
that's where you can get on the mailing list. You
Okay.
can make a donation. That's the easiest way to connect with us and to be a part of it. The exciting thing about this, particularly after Texas Monthly wrote their article, people are coming out of the woodwork. I didn't realize there were as many thru hikers and long distance gravel riders in the state as there are. And they said, we've been on your route. We've been to Colorado. We've been out west. We see the potential for this. And what can we do to help? I'm meeting with 4:30 this afternoon with one of those guys who's coming over here. And every day I have that conversation.
Okay.
And these people, they're professionals. They've got resources. They've got networks with people with money. Put me in touch with them. Okay. Thank you.
Well, that was certainly some fun. I hope you enjoyed listening to Charlie Gandy talk about his life and are anticipating our next podcast where we talk with Charlie about the xTexas Trail and what he plans to do with it. He's ridden about the first 300 miles and he's working on riding the rest of it. So let's see what we can do. Go to xTexas.org and you can find a place to donate money to this effort. And thank you. And we'll see you in the next episode of the podcast, Celebrating Differences.